So hello and welcome to another episode of A View from the Top. I'm Adrian Cropley. A View from the Top is a regular podcast from the Centre for Strategic Communication Excellence, where I interview some of the world's leading communication professionals as we explore their career journey. Trudy Lewis, my special guest today, has worked in communications for over 18 years, focusing on internal communication, employee engagement, and communications for change programs. Somewhat after my own heart, I must say. So Trudy has supported a number of leading organisations in the retail, hospitality, rail and construction industries. So quite a breadth of experience. Trudy is certainly a leader, though, within our profession, also being a board director of the CIPR and runs her own practice, Collinia, in London. And I'm going to ask Trudy if I said that right. She's also worked for, and this is going to be my first question today, for Calm-Edged Rebels. And she's currently doing that role as well, which will be, as I said, my first question today. And Trudy can be seen speaking all around the world at a number of key events and is an avid guest speaker, I must say, which shows truly that she has a passion both for internal communications, engagement, and change. Trudy, welcome. That was a mouthful.
Hi.
Now, did I get it right? Collinia?
Yeah, it's Collinia.
Ah, fantastic. I'm really
right.
glad I got that one right. I'm going to start with Calm-Edged Rebels, though.
Yes.
That really intrigued me. Tell me a little bit about that, and then I'm going to explore a little bit about what you're doing now.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me, by the way.
Welcome.
So Calm-Edged Rebels is a collaboration between friends, and literally we weren't expecting it to be a podcast, and since then we've also launched a retreat, but it's all come out of things that we've done together. So we've, funnily enough, met in through CIPR, Chartered Institute of Public Relations. We all volunteered, and we've been doing it for years and worked on the committee together, and all in internal comms. And from that, we had this just connection. I'd done a research report with Jenny, and we just had this really great connection. We all then decided to go to IABC World Conference in 2019 and connected even further. So we all stayed together, and we had this time of just getting together, talking to each other about each other's dreams. We want to change the world, all those types of things that we wanted to do, and really encouraged each other. And from that, we started to do a little, our own comms retreat with the three of us, where we'd go off and develop each other. And then while we were doing that, we thought, do you know what? We talk all the time on WhatsApp with lots and a massive back and forth in terms of our conversation. Why don't we do this as a conversation on a podcast now? So we have a podcast that has no guests, and it's just the three of us talking about a range of topics, all more or less related to communication, all related to what we do. And and it started, I think it was it the 2020? I think the first time we started was actually during lockdown, and we've not stopped. Yeah. So we're on season 5 at the moment.
That is amazing.
Yeah, which is amazing. 5. And one of the dreams that we had was to launch a retreat like the one that we do with ourselves for other people, and we did our first session last month. So it was amazing. Yeah.
Now, when you say retreat, I am thinking you're going somewhere quite nice, you're having a lovely lunch, or is this a virtual retreat?
Well, the one that we do is, face to face. We go somewhere really nice in the UK. The first couple were in Cotswolds, really lovely countryside.
Lovely.
We get a nice Airbnb where we all kind of cook and so on. So it's a mixture of actual working on our businesses, and just rest and camaraderie, doing things that are fun, and building ourselves up, because we have to have a balance.
Yeah. And it's, it's really interesting because the whole concept of a retreat just before COVID was I was starting to organize a communication retreat in Bali. And so I had this idea that I wanted communication professionals to get together. We talk a little bit about communication. We do something with the local community, but we actually focus a little bit on that the whole concept of retreat and that relaxation, getting back in touch, because I don't think we do that enough as professionals. Now, I mean, communication professionals, we're great at talking, and we're great at organising, we're great at getting in there, but we're not so good at slowing down.
No. And it's really interesting that you say it that way, because when we were trying to do the 3-day retreat for other people, and to be fair, it's not just about communication people. And then we decided to condense it into a 1-day intensive. Great. So that's the retreat that we actually did. And it was fascinating how just that 1 day away still felt as if to say we'd gotten, a bit of space, time away, just a time to relax and meet people, go through some of the things that are causing us to be stuck or causing us not to move forward, and talking about comms and all sorts of things. So, but look, I love that concept, and I think we need to continue this conversation when we're in New York, because I know that both of us are going to be in New York in this month, in June. I know, it's going to be amazing.
Great. Tell me a little bit about that, because I want to explore your career, but I also want to, being so close to conference now, it'd be great to understand what you're coming to New York. I'm going to be there. I'm speaking as well. But what are you talking on, and who are you talking with? And
well, Michael Nord and I. So Michael is part of IABC as well, and we came together because we talk a lot about change management, change comms, and we feel there's a real conversation there about how communication is integral to getting change rights. So all of what we're talking about is looking at all of this from the perspective of, well, what do change managers look at? How do they approach change? And how can we come alongside more effectively? Because at the moment, we're still seeing that many change programs aren't successful. And, there are various reasons why, but my belief is that communication is perhaps the key that is missing, and especially communications at an early stage. So we're looking at things like change models. We're looking at how communication works alongside that. And also some of the things that we need to do to step up a little bit. So some of the things that we need to be a bit more assertive about, maybe our professionalism, how we tap into strategy, the advice we can give leaders that they don't really get from change management, just to get it over the line and to get it over the line successfully.
And I have to say, to imagine both you and Michael Nord talking together, New York, that is a session I think people should be going
I'm looking
I think they'll have a ball. Because I know it will be fun, it'll be animated, and you'll get so much out of it. So
I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be good fun.
So my plug for that session as well. So
thank you.
Let's talk a little bit about where it all started for you. Now we're going to go back just a little way, right? Back to the old, when I was in school, what was it I wanted to do when I grew up? Maybe that's the question I'm going to start with. Was it communication, or was it something else?
Well, it was nothing. I had a blank. It was really, really funny, because in school, and I'd say this to anybody who's struggling and so on, it doesn't necessarily come to you as a light bulb moment in school. But what was really interesting in school, I did. I led the magazine committee. I was doing the photography club. I helped the debating society, but I didn't actually debate. I actually did that thing where you coach the people to be the debaters.
Right.
So I would help people with their arguments and, all of that kind of stuff. So those are the things I used to really get a lot of pleasure from at school, probably even more than schoolwork. And because I didn't have a clear picture of what I wanted to do, I went straight into hospitality management. So I worked with hotels. And this was back in Jamaica. So my parents had moved us back to Jamaica.
Right.
So I did high school in Jamaica and started to work in the hospitality industry. It was a business hotel.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's where I started.
Wow, what did you learn through working in hospitality? I mean, obviously you didn't quite go, right, hospitality, I'm going to end up in comms. No. But what did you learn that kind of change your thinking or move you towards a career in comms?
I think a lot of it was about me dealing with people. So when the types of positions I had at the hotel, I was working with people who, so you're working very much upwards, so diplomats and so on. It was a business hotel, and I worked quite closely at the time with the general manager, and then I worked into the food and beverage side of the business. So I think what I learned more than anything else was how to interact with people, a bit of diplomacy, and managing upwards was a lot of what I had to do. And also not being so afraid of meeting people and being a bit more, I'm a bit of an extrovert anyway. So, it was quite easy for me to get hooked into that. So the socialization part of the job. And then I moved back to the UK for studying. And when I did that, I realized I didn't want to work 18 hours a day anymore.
Yeah,
and it's quite weird.
Hospitality is that industry, isn't it?
Yeah, it's great. It was great fun, but especially coming out of high school, because I didn't do any college or anything at that point. And then I came back to the UK, and I did a whole soul searching type thing. I said, what do I do naturally, and what do I love? And I found it was PR. So started to do some studies in that, started to pursue roles in that as well, and just gradually got into PR, which then segued into internal comms, because I didn't like the perception of PR at the time was very frivolous. I liked the more thinking, and sorry, PR people, I know your job is thinking, but it's just that at the time, it was very ab fab. I don't know if you get that over there, but yes. It's very much that. And so as a result, I didn't like the fast pace either. I liked the slower burn of working with leaders and stakeholders and so on. So yeah.
Yeah. So the Patsy was not in the blood. Is that the ab fab reference? Yeah.
No,
but it's interesting because you and I are on very similar paths, because internal comms is where I grew up in communication. That was my first job in communication, right. And it felt a little bit like home once I found internal communication, because it was about the people. So when you look at that change for you from hospitality, dealing with people, into, yes, you did the studies in PR, but then you kind of found internal comms. What was the link? So you did that study. What was it that got you into internal comms, and where did you kind of kick off that career?
Well, it was interesting. It was an early job that I took that was for an organization that was going through mergers. Funnily enough, it was a hospitality company. So it was a massive contract catering company, I think Compass Group. Yeah. And I went in there thinking I was going to focus more on external comms, but because their thing was all about mergers and acquisitions at the time, I got heavily involved in internal comms, which at the time I hadn't really heard much about. So I didn't really know very much about it. And the corporate comms director said, this is what we're doing now. And it was merger after merger. Mm-hmm. So it was about looking after these new teams of people that were coming in. It was about helping leadership to speak to them properly, and the whole process of how you onboard people from an internal comms perspective. So it was fascinating. So I thought, I love this much more than the external stuff, because I did get a few, experiences with working externally as well. We had a number of PR companies as well that we used to manage. So,
and it's really interesting. And I think we often push against the tag of of PR, and it's still hard to shake that title a little bit from PR to communication, and there still is that little bit of what PR is about. Is it spin? And then you get the politics of the world, which is still probably operating the 1950s style of communication. Spin. I mean, authenticity is not a word that we've got in most political arenas yet. We've been dealing with it in internal comms for years, right?
It's true. But I do think, without that really strong grounding in PR, and the PR that I learned at university and so on was more made me want to do it because it was strategic, it was interesting, it covered a lot. And so what we see interpreted as PR isn't really truly what it is. We've made it a lot lighter.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, we've made it a lot lighter than it really is. I say to people when they say things like spin, I'm like, well, actually, it's not spin. And it can't be spin, because if it's spin, then it's not going to work. So it's got to be how we strategically work with people to build and develop their reputation. So it's important.
Yeah, and look, when we reflect on, and I remember, was it the Edelman Trust Barometer in 2017 was saying the state of trust was in crisis, and it was all the 4 pillars of society that people didn't trust anymore. But it's businesses, it's been organizations that is making that comeback. And I tend to like to give a little bit of credit to the fact that communication is a lot more mature in organizations that are going, actually, this is actually about connection. It's about people. It's about authenticity. And I think those organizations that are getting it really get it.
Yeah, totally.
So when I think about, and you talked a little bit about coaching in school. So you coach the debating team, right? Yes. I think there was an early sign there that says this is probably something you were going to do later in your career. And I heard you and I had a bit of a conversation before we kicked off today's podcast. And that's one of the things that you're doing today. And I look at your roles like being part of the CIPR on the board there, and that's something you've done till recently. You volunteer, you speak, you coach. Is that what you do now? Is that's really what drives and motivates you?
Yeah, I think my business has evolved. So it was heavily into strategic communications and consulting for that, and I was pursuing that heavily. But also, I'd gone and trained as a coach, and so. And the reason why was just simply to enhance all of that, because I think not really a bugbear, but the thing that has really concerned me is how little leaders engage with communication, and yet still they commission it.
Yeah.
So, and also part of that comes from the fact that many of them, they may have done MBAs, they may have done quite big education, but within all of that education, there's no communications element in it. So I just had a concern around, how do you then engage people? The biggest challenge that most of us have when we get into organizations to support them with internal comms is the fact that leadership don't understand what we do.
Yep, correct.
And so as a result, I felt that I wanted to shift things more to the leadership development around communication. I still do things with internal communicators, and I still, occasionally do a consulting job around that. But the majority of what I'm pushing for is that leadership development and coaching. And, I recently did a workshop around communications for a leadership team, and it was quite interesting to hear, to be able to share some of the things around styles of communication. And, they only wanted to know, how do we get to the plan bit? And I was thinking, no, we need to talk about approach. We need to talk about how you're thinking about comms, and get some kind of agreement amongst you as to how you're going to communicate a change. And I feel that I definitely feel that will move people along, because again, as we support change, as we support engagement, it's more than the survey. And it's more than the change program. And if we can get people to communicate better, then that's better all round. So the people who are experiencing change, like the employees on the ground, they will have a better experience if leaders understand how to communicate.
And you making me smile as you're talking about this, because it's a passion piece for me also. And
Really?
I remember I remember way back when I built my second strategy for internal comms for a global organization. And
Yeah.
I built into that is we developed our leaders in communication. We would no longer need an internal communication department because they would be doing so well. And I called it my do myself out of a job strategy.
Yeah.
And I mean, we never achieved it. It was probably one of the biggest failures. It wasn't really. We pushed the dial, we moved the dial, but what we didn't take into account is you can develop this season of leaders, and then there's another fresh lot that's coming out, as you said, from MBAs and from studies, moving up into the ranks, or coming from shop floor to senior leader levels that just miss so much of that leadership skill in communication. So they can build all these other ones, but that connecting with people and understanding self and others is just the missing piece.
Yeah, and I think
as you're doing it.
I know. Sorry, and I think as communicators, we underestimate the skills that we do carry, and it's the kind of skills that, if used correctly, leadership are so grateful for. They use you as their sounding boards. They'll ask you your opinion about things that they probably won't ask anybody else, because we have a certain skill and way about us. So,
yes. Yeah. And it's, for the people out there that are listening and they're building their career, it's important to say, what are some of the lessons? Because it's great that, people like yourself, myself, are in that area of advising leaders, coaching leaders. But to get to that place, for some, just seems like, it's a long way away. What would be some of the things you would share with people to how you actually make yourself relevant in internal communication and make yourself relevant to leaders, for you to build your credibility to start with, and for them to start engaging with you?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think a lot of it for me has been getting to know the people that I serve really, really well. So if there was any skill that I think that we need to develop, it's listening and questioning. It's getting over the fact that, these people are more senior than us, and sometimes it's daunting to talk to them, but they actually do want the interaction. So it's moving into the space of saying, I am going to have those conversations, even though it's slightly uncomfortable to start with. But the minute you get to the point where they're talking to you regularly, it becomes easier. So I think from my experience, there are things like not actually sitting back and stepping up and saying something. So I hear a lot of things like, we don't have a seat at the table, but sometimes we have to open up the way for that seat. We have to be a little bit assertive, a little more confident in the skills that we have, and feel comfortable with being that person in that room, or being comfortable giving a piece of advice, even if we think nobody's going to hear it. So it's that I think, learning things like what's happening with the business, what's happening with business as a whole. So building business acumen as well is a huge part of it, and being curious. I'm always talking about being curious. So it's having the curiosity to ask questions. So I would do things like talk to the strategy director, have conversations with all random types of people, simply because I was so curious about what was really happening. And eventually what it meant was I built a type of rapport that meant that people came and talked to me as well. So, it doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual kind of, I'm going to have the attitude that says I'm going to be open. I'm going to have conversations with people. I'm very, very committed to building rapport, so that we can have this conversation. Back in, I think it was 2017 or 2018, I did a report for CIPR on the value and effectiveness of internal communications, and we interviewed CEOs, leaders, about what they needed. And one of the things that came out of that was the fact that they did need that interaction. They did need relationship building, and they needed to have a bit of rapport and conversation with us about what we did. And if that bit that's missing sometimes is all that's needed.
Yeah. And it's, and I think, as I'm listening to you, I think for a lot of young communication professionals, it's being a little bit brave around doing it too.
Totally.
So patience and courage, maybe two things that they need to get there. Because I think, I don't know about you, and I'm not going to put you in the same basket as me, but as you get older, you tend to go, my filter's gone a little bit, and I am a little bit more straight down the line. But when I was a young professional, I was like, I kind of need to impress this leader. I need to do as I'm told. I need to make an impression. And sometimes that puts you in a position where you're just providing the service rather than the challenge.
Yeah. And it's interesting you say that, because it's about believing in the skills that you have. Your skills are unique. So as communicators, we've gone and learned this craft. Yeah. And not everybody learns it, even though the minute you talk about communications, people say, I know how to write, I know how to do this, I know how to communicate. That's true, but they don't know how to do it well. And what we've learned is we've learned, in a sense, the science of it, and how it works. And so as a result, have a little trust in that you've learned, you've understood it. You're not coming at it as a novice or somebody who's just thought, oh, I'll just become a communicator. You actually are doing it from the perspective of, I've learned this craft. I know what I'm talking about. Because the minute you come with that attitude, people want to know more. People are like, well, tell me, how do I do this properly?
And sometimes it's about believing in your intuition, isn't it? Once you've learned your craft, you kind of go, look, I'm hearing what you're saying, Mr. or Mrs. Leader. This is what you want to do. But the gut here is saying, I can articulate exactly what is going to go wrong here, but you might just want to trust the fact that this is not going to go so well if you do it this way. Yeah. We have to do that as well. But I have to give, I have to put it into context that, it's not easy. It's not always easy to do that. And, it's easy to say, oh, you need to be more assertive and confident and so on. It's not that easy, but I think it's about taking small steps towards it. Yeah, so. I could agree. Thank you for those wise words. And I'm sure everybody's going to get some real value out of what you've been sharing so far today. And I don't want to close just yet. And I know we're getting up to our time, but I can't help but keep chatting to you. If we look at some of the things that you're doing now, obviously you've spent some time serving on the CIPR board. What are some of the things you think you might be doing next? What's your interests, and where's your motivations going to be taking you next? Because you've built this amazing career, great experiences. You're giving that back through the businesses that you're doing, and I absolutely love your retreats. I'm going to try and get an invite. But what's next for you? And in fact, what's next for maybe internal communications?
Gosh, yeah, I am waving the flag for strategic communications.
Oh, no.
So what's next for me is addressing strategic communications from a leadership perspective, and so it's just continuing that journey, I think, and developing it as much as I can. I'm a strong believer that we have to demonstrate the value of internal communications. We have a lot of value. So anything that promotes that, I think I'll continue to promote that as much as possible, and who we need to be as leaders. So it's the same thing with communicators. When I talk about leadership, we're all leaders in some way. And so I think there's a lot to be said about developing yourself as a leader, even in the sphere of communication, if that's your career. So I believe I'll be doing more of that. I will be doing probably more coaching than consulting, but I really want to perhaps be a voice promoting some of these thoughts around communications, change, engagement, and so on. So maybe writing more, hopefully speaking more, just doing more things that do that. Like And one of the interesting things about having a podcast with Carmage Rebels, which actually is a nod to each one of our businesses.
Yes.
So I have a model called Edge, which is the leadership development thing that I'm developing. And it's just, building all of that, because I think whereas some people say, oh, technology's coming in, so strategic communications won't be as needed. I am a strong believer that, yes, that, and that's how people talk. It's a bit like, well, we've got the tech bit sorted, so we don't really need you.
Yes.
So perhaps older practitioners probably feel a bit obsolete at this moment, but we're not obsolete. I think the need for strategy is still there. And so I really want to make sure that is front and center all the time.
So, and it's funny because I heard somebody say the other day, they said, oh, we've got Grammarly. We really don't need communication professionals.
Yes.
They can do all our work for us. AI just is going to take over communication.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
But I did some work with an IT organization and a CEO who comes from an IT background. And I tell you what, if there was any case for communication coaching in communication of leaders, there was a case for it, because I can tell you it was technology will take care of it. Just use Teams, just do this, just send something out, and it's all done. And you and I both know it takes a lot more.
If that was the case, then we wouldn't have so many companies saying, well, how are we going to get our head around hybrid? How are we going to get our head around all these things? Because the technology is fantastic, but it doesn't solve the people. It doesn't solve people. No. It doesn't connect. It connects you, but it doesn't deal with what people are dealing with.
Yes.
And I think there's a carefulness that I think we have to have around just handing it over to technology.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, I could talk to you forever on these ones, and we're going to continue this conversation in New York because I think we got a lot to talk about. But thank you. We've had Michael on the View from the Top. We've had some of your other colleagues, and I am so pleased that we finally had you on.
I'm so pleased to be here.
It's been such a pleasure, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Thanks, too.
And thanks to everyone for joining us in this episode of A View from the Top. I am looking forward to talking to you in our next episode, which is coming up in July. Take care and have a great day.